All right, I got everything set up. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. My name is Vin, like VIN number, exactly like that. So I had a guy here, he called me Vin Diesel. That's nice. I am a child of God, and I have a history 10 years back of methamphetamine addiction. When I was growing up, I had a mother who loved me dearly, taught me what was right, taught me what was wrong. A Vietnamese mother who would hit me when I did something wrong with a broomstick. And so I unmistakably knew what was right and what was wrong, but I always chose to do the wrong thing. I had a couple of brothers, same thing. I had a father who was trying to take care of his 3 sons, and we were just incorrigible. Couldn't really keep us in check. We did whatever we wanted to do, and we felt like it was okay as long as we weren't hurting people. We felt like it was okay to do whatever we wanted, to lie, to cheat, to steal, so long as nobody was really getting hurt. And it was interesting because my mother is Buddhist, and she raised me knowing that the wrongs I did in this life, I would have to pay for in the next life. I was such a bad kid. I thought to myself, well, let that next guy pay for it, because I'm going to do what I want. It was not a way to keep me in check, that Buddhist belief. It was not a way to keep me wanting to do what is right. I always was selfish. And throughout my entire life of selfishness, I was never really that happy. It's funny how I would chase down whatever I wanted, did whatever I wanted, and I was still extremely unhappy. So I did drugs back in high school because I was supposed to get straight A's. And someone told me about this wonderful drug that would keep me awake, and it was called methamphetamines. So my senior year, I took that, and it got to the point where I had no control over it. It had control over me. And it aggravated me, and it got on my nerves because I had a lot of ego as a young teenager. So out of sheer willpower, I decided I'm done with this drug. And I stopped. And then I met my future wife, and she said, is there anything that I need to know about you? And I said, yes. When I was in high school, I used to do methamphetamines. But don't worry, if someone were to knock on the door, that's what it would take for me to get back on this stuff. Knock on the door with a bag of drugs and say, let's do this drug. That's the only way I would ever go back to ever touching methamphetamines, but I'll never look for it. I'm not after it. Well, must have been 8 years into my marriage. That's exactly what happened. The devil must have been listening. My wife was on a business trip, and a friend of mine knocked on the door and had an 8-ball of meth for me. And that led a very rocky journey for the next 4 years of hiding my addiction from people who obviously knew that I was on something, from trying to be sneaky, but not really. Everyone would whisper behind my back, to thinking that I had everything under control, but my world was collapsing around me. It got to the point where my wife, she wanted to leave me. She was done. This was the love of my life. Sweet, sweet lady. Beautiful. I remember when I met her, she asked me if I was a Christian, and she was just so gorgeous. I just said, absolutely, I'm a Christian. She figured out pretty quick that I was probably lying. And she would drag me to church, and I would go and I'd fall asleep, and she'd kick me, she'd elbow me. And that happened for most of our marriage. I think that when, they call me chef. I'm a chef, by the way. I was working in these kitchens, and meth makes you skinny. You can't trust a skinny chef. Take it from me. You cannot trust a skinny chef. I went to some fancy restaurants on the West Coast. I went to Marlboro Ranch in Montana. I went to Moab, Utah. Moab, Utah. I went to Beaver Creek, Colorado. Fancy restaurants. Always chasing money, chasing fame, doing whatever I wanted. But with my drug addiction, I couldn't keep up the balancing act. At that point in my life, I had a 4-year-old daughter. Most of her life, I was high. She would wait up for me till like 2 in the morning for me to get home, and I'd be drunk. It wouldn't even register. Why is my daughter up at 2 in the morning? Me and my wife, we fought all the time. The drugs put me on an emotional roller coaster. I could not control my anger or my sadness, my happiness. I couldn't control myself. There was one morning where my wife and I, we fought viciously. And she said she's done with me. She's going to leave. And that morning, I remember specifically, I was out of drugs. I was out of drugs that night before. And that night before, we were fighting. And I thought to myself, if I just go and get some more drugs, I'll get high again, and then I'll be in a better attitude, and I'll make this right with my wife. It'll fix it. Drugs will fix this. So I leave the house that morning. I'm dropping my kid off at school, and I got a big wad of cash, rolled up bills in my pocket. I had already texted my drug dealer. I'm going to swing by after I drop my kid off at school. So I drop off my kid, and something stopped me. It was weird. It was strange. I would never say I was a religious person. So I pulled off into a dirt parking lot. I parked in the center of the parking lot because when you're on meth, you get paranoid. So I parked in the middle of the parking lot so I could see from every angle if any cops or anybody were coming my way. And I got out of the truck, and I had this feeling that I had a choice to make that day, a decision that had to be made. So in anger, I screamed at the sky at a God that I didn't believe in. I would never say that I believed in a God. And I said, if you exist, you need to prove it to me. You need to show me that you exist. You need to show me that you care. Prove to me you are there. If you can do that, I won't go buy these drugs. And I promise you, I will devote my life to you. So he gave me a sign, an unmistakable sign, a powerful sign. That for a half a second I thought, that's just a coincidence. No. But I stopped myself because right when I saw this sign, it's exactly what I was asking for. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go with that. I got back into my truck, and I headed home. I didn't buy the drugs. Still had the money in my pocket. I opened the door. My wife is crying. I didn't know if she'd been crying the whole time or what, but she's crying. The woman I love looked at me in disgust when I walked in the door. So I said the only thing that I could think of. I said, sweetie, don't worry. It's going to be different. I'm going to change. And she said, I've heard that before, and I don't believe you. And actually, I just don't care. I didn't know what to do about that. So I go into my house, and I pick up a Bible. It was a King James Bible. Very hard to read, by the way. And I started reading it. And it takes about It takes about 80 hours to read the Bible for me. So you can read many different translations of the Bible in about 6 months. I had read about 10, 11 different translations, English translations of the Bible. I read the NIV, I read the NASB, I read the King James, the New King James, I read the Message. I like the Message. I read the ESV. Oh, I read the Bible. I did not become a Christian when God gave me a sign in that parking lot. I became a God believer. I believed that there was a God. But when I read the Bible, and I read it all the way up to the first gospel in Matthew, I believed that there was a man named Jesus who came to this earth, who was God in the flesh, who died for my sins. And it brought me to tears. I became a Christian by reading the Bible. And I couldn't get enough of it. But my wife and I were still in some strange limbo. We were just ignoring each other for 6 months. You going to pick up the kid? Yeah, I'll pick up the kid. You going to pick up the kid? Yeah, I'll pick up the kid. You want me to get anything for dinner? No. But we weren't really a married couple. We were like roommates. Not even super friendly roommates, just roommates. And she comes up to me about 6 months later-ish, and she says, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yes, I would love to talk." And she said, "On the day that you came in, do you remember when you said you had changed?" And I didn't believe you. And I said, "Yes, I remember that day." She said, "I was praying that day. I was praying that day to God." And my wife, she was raised Christian. She knows the sanctity of marriage. She was a good girl. I screwed her up. We were what the Bible refers to as unequally yoked, which is a farming term. I had to look that up. It's when a couple of cows, oxen, are hooked together with this wooden bar hooked across their neck. If one of the cows is too short or too fat, they'll go one direction. One cow will drag the other one in circles. They won't go straight. Me and my wife were not going straight. We were going crooked. And if you go crooked enough times, all you do is just end up going in circles. So when she told me she prayed, I started getting really excited. And like the typical guy, I just interrupted her and said, "Hey, I prayed that day too. Let me tell you all about it." And I'm telling her my story. I'm telling her how I screamed at the sky. I'm excited about this story. It's a good story. You guys think it's a good story. And she was just staring at me, blank-faced, no emotion. And as a guy who's not really that good at reading the room, I could tell, she was not really impressed. So I looked at her and I said, "I apologize for interrupting you. What did you want to say?"